Get started for this evening's meeting. So let me dispatch with the formalities. Bear with me, please. Take me a couple of minutes. Welcome to the August 18th, 2025 meeting of the Standish Zoning Board of Appeals. This meeting will now come to order. This is a public proceeding, and unless the board specifically votes to go into executive session, you have the right to hear everything that is being said and to look at all the exhibits that are offered. Please notify the chairperson, myself, if you are unable to see or hear. The board does work from a prepared agenda and will be considering tonight's items in the following order. Old business, we have a continuance from the June 16th, 2025 ZBA meeting regarding an application for a special exception. The Pine Tree Estates, which is owned and operated by RH Properties, is the applicant, and they're requesting to expand the mobile home park. It's Ossipee Trail West, maps 5 and 6. Map 5, it's lots 32, 33, and 38. Map 6, lots 15 and 18B. The application is being presented by project consultant Mr. Jason Vaviadis. Is that correct? Perfect. Atlantic Resource Consultants. No new business tonight that I'm aware of. So for this special exception request, the applicant will be asked to proceed first, and then be available to answer questions from the board. After the applicant has spoken, all other interested parties may make their presentations and then be questioned by the board. After all interested parties have spoken, each side will be given an opportunity for a brief rebuttal. Once the public comment session is closed, the board will deliberate and decide the matter. This meeting is being recorded, and it is very difficult to hear what is being said when multiple people speak at the same time or do not speak into the microphone at the podium. Please refrain from interrupting other speakers. Questions should be addressed through myself, the chairperson. Again, we ask that each person offering testimony come forward to the microphone at the podium and begin by giving their name and address. As a reminder, the burden is upon the applicant to demonstrate compliance with the provisions of the applicable ordinances. The applicant must demonstrate the proposal seeking a use approval meets each of the defined seven criteria for a special exception. For a special exception application, the board acts by majority vote of the five-member board. We have 5 members present this evening. For a special exception to be granted, you will require at least 3 members voting in favor of each of the 7 criteria. A tie vote on any of the 7 criteria is insufficient to grant a special exception. Following a decision on the application or appeal, the board will prepare a written decision indicating its findings of fact and conclusions of laws that will be made available to the participant within 7 days of the board's vote. If your application or appeal is granted, you must obtain a building permit from the code enforcement officer. If anyone wishes to appeal the board's decision, you must do so to Superior Court within 45 days. Any questions with what I just read? Perfect. So before we begin with the applicant's opening remarks, the continuance, I know Mr. Bradbury had disclosed at the last meeting in June that he has a conflict as a member of a family that's in a butter to the project. So he will be removing himself from participation this evening, correct?
That is correct.
Great, thank you. And Ms. Ramirez, who was not here at the June meeting, the others do not have a conflict, but I'll ask you, do you happen to have any conflict with this particular applicant?
I do not.
That need to be disclosed. Okay, great. So we have 4 members of the board that will participate this evening and see if we can't adjudicate this application. Okay. Mr. Bradbury, you may step down into the audience.
Recuse myself.
Thank you. Okay. As meeting housekeeping, I will take a motion that the meeting will span a runtime of 3 hours total. Hopefully it'll conclude far before that, but we won't be exceeding 9 p.m.
So moved.
Second? Any other discussion? All in favor? All right,
Aye.
Great. Okay, so let's pick up where we left off. The board had made some requests, some inquiries. We're treating this as a new application. We have had time to process much of the prior data. I do respect the fact that the applicant has been through this process before on 2 separate occasions. This is round 3. And I do believe much of the prior information is still relevant. However, we did have some questions since it's been several years, and we wanted some updated information. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jason You want to take the podium? I believe you might have a presentation this evening, or are you just going to speak to?
So, Jason Vafiatis, Atlantic Resource Consultants / Verdantis, if you follow the news, not that all that important. But thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. We do have a slide presentation, and I noticed we're not powered up. Which is fine. I'm an old school paper guy myself, so I have paper. So, and we have some extra copies, so we can let people from the public look. And yeah, Jeff, as you talked about, this governing body has seen this project a number of times. I know Jackie's probably thrown out her back handling all our different applications. So, yeah, the two primary questions you had were traffic and updated environmental reports.
Environmental, correct.
And some discussion maybe on sort of the vagaries of how development interplays with sort of undeveloped tracts of land, in which we've got my man Lucian here, who's our environmental scientist in our office, can talk about that. But the presentation you have in front of you, if you just switch to the first slide, second page, first slide, just give you a quick sort of history, as we've mentioned. So in 2009, we were here for a 101-unit manufactured housing park expansion. That approval was granted and then expired before the applicants, or the owners at the time, proceeded with that. And then the park was subsequently purchased by my client, RHP Properties. And we were here in December of 2021, and we got an approval of 112 home sites, then came back recent to that in October of 2022 and boosted that up to 133 sites. And that was the application you probably most remember. And that one had gone through other sort of projects through the town. The reason we're back here again for a reduced number of 97 units is there was a discrepancy with how we interpreted your ordinances for frontage requirements and being able to utilize cluster standards within a subdivision. Don't want to confuse you with that. We're back fully compliant with the ordinance with 100-foot frontages on the individual lots on the plan that you see. If you flip to the next slide, this is now the new layout. Very, very similar to the old layout. All of the roads and sort of infrastructure, ponds and everything remain where they'd been designed previously. Everything just gets a little smaller. So because of the reduction in impervious area for the units and also for septic design, all that stuff, we're able to shrink that footprint in just a little bit. Everything else remains basically the same. And on the fourth slide, this is again 97 home sites. We're 36 less than what was previously approved. Our limits of disturbance from the old plans remain intact, and actually those boundaries shrink. So our total developed area is going to be reduced. We don't know that exact amount yet because we haven't finished final design, which would be a planning board application process. So would like to remind you that this is just the first in a two-step process. If we're successful here, we go on to the planning board, in which we have 6 months to get approval there in order to uphold a potential approval, should one be granted here. And then, so the specific criteria, we can just go through these quickly. Under your ordinance, we should have no unusual characteristics atypical of generic use, and the proposed use will not depreciate the economic value of surrounding properties. We feel we've met this standard 2 or 3 times before. We've provided you with the same sort of background that we provided previously. It is consistent. It's a current use. We're just expanding a site that's already existing. Most of these units will be expanded on the back of the property where there's no visual impacts from public properties at all, nor will it have any economic impact to the surrounding neighborhood. And the next slide is the traffic. So the traffic impact study that we had submitted last time, which was resubmitted, was for 133 units. We have updated that now, which you have in your records, for the 97-unit layout. And you were looking for specific sort of reductions at the last meeting, and we've provided those to you here. We're reducing total trips by 27.8% from the previous approval, and peak hour trips actually tips up to 28.6% as part of this project. And the traffic impact study does state that we don't need a formal MDOT traffic movement permit, but we do need to do just due diligence and traffic design. There are traffic improvements associated with this project, should it go forward, that will result in some traffic improvements out on Route 25, as well as internal improvements that will be made as part of that traffic impact study. And then for the environmental update, I get to wet my whistle here for a second, and I'll turn that over to Lucian.
Great, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lucian Langlois. I'm a professional wetland scientist and a licensed site evaluator with Atlantic Resource Consultants. I've been working on this project since about 2021. Since then, there's been an extensive amount of environmental survey and work done here. To summarize this design, it reduces our overall lot count, and what that does is it clusters everything and reduces our overall numbers. This really just allows for us to maximize the upland area that's on the site and just continue to have animals use the area as they do right now with minimal disruption. Some of the highlights here is that, like I already talked about, this design is clustered, so that reduces the land footprint, and in turn, those wetland impacts are able to be further reduced. In particular, we cross wetlands where they're the skinniest to minimize impacts, and when we get close to them, we steepen grades and things like that to reduce our encroachment into them. Tree clearing, in particular, we want to make sure we only clear what we need to and preserve corridors and habitat migration throughout the site. In particular, we do this for our vernal pool species, small mammals, and amphibians through our main road. We have a wide concrete culvert crossing that we'll implement. With funnel fencing, what funnel fencing does is it forces those amphibians and reptiles to go right at the crossing. We don't want them to go up and over the road, as mortality would be an issue with a traffic road like this. On the other side of the site, we have the emergency access road, which won't see a lot of vehicle use. So for that, we're going to maintain the same existing footprint of Old Dow Road, and those animals can just go up and over safely. In particular, for all of these surveys we've done, we've worked with the United States Army Corps of Engineers. They partner with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And what we talked about with them, really concerned with bats and our federally listed bat species and small world begonia. So to deal with those things, we don't know if they're on the site for sure. For bats, we minimize impacts to them by clearing when we know they're not going to be in the trees with their pups. So basically, that's the summer occupancy period. That's April 15th to September 30th. So we'll avoid tree clearing during that period to comply with the Army Corps suggested window. For the small world begonia, they suggested that we survey for that species again. We had initially done that in I believe it was 2021. And we did that again in 2025, just a few months ago during this growing season. That plant has a tendency to go away and then pop back up a couple years later, so they suggested we do that survey. So we redid that survey. That turned out to be no presence of that species. We worked with our state inland fisheries and wildlife on all the unique habitats on the site. Some of them are known. Some of them we want to just make sure they weren't there. The ones that were known were great blue heron. I'm sure we're kind of used to seeing them. They have a roosting habitat about 2,000 feet southeast off the site, associated with the creek. Inland Fisheries and Wildlife suggested a 660-foot buffer. We confirm that nest is active, and like I said, we're maintaining 2,000 feet, so we're buffered from that very well. Another habitat that came up was the deer wintering area. This is a habitat that's crucial for deer to survive the winter in Maine, so they require softwood, which is your evergreen trees, so they have good canopy cover. IF&W asked for 50% of that cover to be maintained of softwood. We spoke about it, and this habitat was mapped off aerial imagery. It's not really a 50% softwood as it exists right now, but we're barely going into this habitat. In total, the habitat that they have mapped, we're only intruding 1.3% into that habitat. So to maintain the softwood cover is very easy for us to do with our design. The vernal pool buffer, we have one significant vernal pool buffer. The state standards are to maintain at least 75% of that habitat. So with our design, we were limited because we already have existing development within that buffer with the existing park. So we had to really crunch some stuff and pull some stuff away from that vernal pool buffer. So we're able to maintain 76.3 over the 75% allowed standard. Some other surveys that were done, we did a Blandings turtle survey. That was just to make sure that we did not have that animal present on the site. And again, that was not found to be present, along with the small ropogonia in 21, which we reaffirmed in 25. The vernal pool surveys were done in 2019, along with the wetland delineation, which was updated again in 2021. We checked with the Army Corps of Engineers. Those delineations are good for 5 years. They said that we'd be good to submit with our delineation for our upcoming application to them. And to summarize this, we've worked extensively with resource agencies before this application goes in, so we know what they're concerned with on this site, what exists that's known, what could be here, so we can really just tailor our design to this nuanced conservation practice for what exists on the site. That's kind of the general gist, but I'm glad to take any questions. I'm going to pass it over to Jason in a bit.
Okay. Do you have more to add?
Just going through the rest of the standards, if you
Yeah.
feel like that's
So
fruitful,
the-
I can do that, or if you want to jump right into questions.
No, I don't think we need to do this unless the board would like to hear them speak to each standard. I don't think we need to do that. I just didn't know if you wanted to add anything to what he had just spoke on the environmental piece or the traffic.
Yeah, I'll just sort of reiterate, because Lucian's so into the weeds, so to speak, no pun intended, but with the environmental stuff, and typically I'm more of the project manager, 1,000-foot view sort of guy, and then I go to Lucian and explain to me how we can and cannot do things. Yeah, so this project in particular, I think, because of this process, the one we've gone through, the first couple of times previously, a significant planning board process, really deep review with the DEP, where we were, close to getting a permit issued for the old layout, and then we had to go back and tell them it's not going to work on the town side. I think with regards to just honing it into your, the standards here, I think that I can't say this for all the projects that I do, but I really feel like this project has gotten an incredible amount of scrutiny, and rightfully so, in that we have really done, I'm proud of Lucian and my staff for doing all the work with the regulators and getting this design to a point where we can still afford to build it, but we really do a good job with preservation of everything that we can. Giving that 125 feet to Josie's Brook, leaving, as Lucian was talking about, sort of those migration corridors for animals, right? So they can come up Josie's Brook. There's a huge swath of land that isn't going to get touched on the lower levels. There's plenty of deer habitat there. We just sort of leave them there more than 50% in open space. We get these homes, which are, we don't want to lose sight of the fact that, housing is hard to find these days. And so we really want to get, some affordable housing in here, some expansion. And, we're pretty proud of the job we've done. So look forward to answering any questions with traffic or any of the other items, environmental items that you may have. And, just thanks for your time.
Thanks, Jason. Did somebody else want to speak on behalf of RH Properties? No? Good, okay. Bill? No? You sure?
Said nothing tonight.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll get you up there before the end of the night.
Nice to see you.
All right, so let's, okay, so that's it for the presentation, right? All right, you've got, okay. So I'm gonna open it up to questions for Jason or Lucian. we can start. I particularly had a couple of follow-up items. My two areas of greatest concern was just making sure the updated information on traffic was refreshed. Doesn't seem to be an impact, but I certainly want to allow others to speak to that. My only question on the traffic, were you folks still using the same roads for access to 25 into the park, or has the plan decided to expand in a manner to take, for example, use Rosita Drive? Because I know that was a big issue at the last.
Yeah, so no use of Rosita Drive. Yep.
Right.
And then, so the two primary are Deer Hill and, someone jog my memory? Sunset, Deer Hill and Sunset, which are the two entrances with the signs that everyone uses. One
Okay.
up by the clubhouse, another one by the original park entrance where the gang mailboxes are and everything.
Anybody have other questions about the traffic piece of this?
I have one question. On the emergency access road, is that wide open, or is that like gated where some blocks?
Gated with a Knox box.
I'm sorry?
Gated with a Knox box, so only the fire department
That'll
and
keep
staff.
people just using, okay, thank you.
And that'll kind of remain not a cow path, but we'll put, so you can drive a fire truck over it. We'll upgrade the gravels that are there, but we're really not changing grades or anything there in order to just allow all the critters to go across it and not get worried about getting run over after rain or anything.
Got it, thank you. Other questions about traffic?
No.
Lauren? No? Obviously, housing has been a lot in the news last year or so. It's just sort of in a crunch. I recognize that. You're proposing, 97 units. Can you tell me, or maybe Bill can tell me, is the park at full capacity right now in terms of occupants?
I think it is, but I'd want to let,
100% occupancy?
yeah.
And what's the mix of the occupancy? Have you guys looked at that in terms of seniors versus?
Joel Brown from RHP Properties. I'm confirming whether or not it's technically 100% or not. I've heard some moans, so maybe one or two sites short of that from a revenue occupancy perspective. I'll confirm that if it matters, but demand is very high. If the question is whether or not we get a lot of inquiries for homes to sell, demand is extremely high. We get a lot of traffic. I can share those numbers separate occasion if you would like to see that. We keep track of that. With regard to your second question was?
The senior?
Senior. I don't have information about that. I think that it's a mix. I think that some of the residents that may be here would maybe share some other opinions about that, but I think that it's fair to say that there is a mix of families and what we would consider over 55 or seniors in there.
Thank you.
Further to that question, Jeff, we still are maintaining the 50% dedicated to
I was
seniors.
going to ask you about that, yeah. Other questions on the board? All right, so we're going to slide into the environmental piece. I think we have some questions on that, and then I'll certainly open up to the public. If anyone in the public has additional comments or would like to present any new information about this. Anybody want to start with some of the environmental questions, some of the work that they've followed up on and performed for us to review?
I'm good, thank you.
Lauren?
Nope.
Okay. So I have a few questions. Shocker. You did the small world begonia study, right, which I had a chance to review, and it seems to mimic what happened last time, right? That some sections may be favorable, but it's just, there's no evidence of it, right? Okay. I am curious, because I went back and I remember the letter dated April 13th, 2020, that was sent from the state IFNW about some of the endangered and threatened species. I know Lucian mentioned a couple of them this evening. I do have a couple of follow-up questions. One is, taking the sort of the begonia piece out of it, which I'm satisfied that it is what it is, right? I have a couple of questions with some of the species, particularly Blanding's turtle. It's interesting because it looks like when I reread that letter from the state, it said, and I'll quote, Blanding's turtles, a state endangered species, have been documented in the immediate vicinity of the project area. And it goes on to cite sort of prefer habitat, the vernal pools, whatnot. So the question I have is, to me, did you get an update from the IFNW specific to Blanding's turtle on the site? And did you do another Blanding's turtle study for this particular site? Because I noticed I was a little curious that I was looking for the Blanding's turtle update, if you will, and I didn't see it. I just saw the begonia update.
So I'm going to try to answer that, and then Lucian may jump in and correct me if I
Feel
get
free
this
to
wrong. So, yeah.
stand up to Lucian if you want, if
Yep.
it's easier. Yeah.
Yep, so I believe at the time that report, the IFNW issue came in, or the letter came back, we hadn't done the full Blanding's turtle survey, correct? And then so we submitted that to IFNW after we got out of here and we're going to planning board. And I think that's how that happened.
Yeah, I think the study, and I pulled the study, it was from September of 2021. That came back, again, it confirmed what you found with the begonia.
Right.
It did identify various amphibians.
Yes.
And other aquatic species.
Yep.
It didn't identify a Blanding turtle in particular.
Right.
But I was just curious, seeing that was, 3 years ago.
Right. So,
4 years ago, sorry.
Correct. So with the Pagonia survey, because we had this sort of the genesis of having to redo the Pagonia survey is we were still pushing for our DEP permits very recently, and they noted the date on that. And so according to their preferred record keeping or study lifespan, the Begonia survey would have needed to be redone. But I believe once you do one Blanding's turtle survey, that suffices for a much longer period of time. Because and I'll let Lucian kind of talk about why that is.
Yeah, state wildlife environmental surveys, we usually only do those once unless there's some major discrepancy with the data, like there was maybe a major drought or the practices, like the methods weren't done to the state standards. What we did for this particular scenario, I believe that Inland Fisheries reached out to us with that letter saying, we have a known occurrence within the immediate vicinity, which then prompts us to, well, we better survey for it on our particular site. And that's where FB Environmental came in during that spring in 2021 to survey the wetlands on the project site for that species, which they didn't find. And that was satisfactory to Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. As Jason was saying, we were going through our DEP process. It was the Army Corps who brought up the Pagonia survey that needed to be redone. They have federal jurisdiction over that as a federally listed species. Blanding's turtle isn't federally listed, so that's more of a state thing that we dealt with IFNW, and one and done for them is the case usually. With that particular species, I know what you're looking at too. They have like a note in there that says, but these species may come onto the site or something like that, and they're in the. And I've talked with FB Environmental about this particular site. They love it. It has a lot of range and habitat. We're next to a very large, undeveloped, contiguous block of habitat. So that means that you're going to have endangered species. You're going to have more of a diversity of habitat because of that reason. We're on the edge of it, right near the existing developed area, Pine Tree Estate, so we're really trying to cluster away from that. It's the whole game here, but we do know that we are close to that area. So that's why we have the large wildlife crossing and the habitat corridors and the reduced amount of tree clearing. That's in an effort to, in case that species is on the site, which we've documented it's not, but in case it does ever come onto the site, these are some precautions to help with conservation of it.
If a blanding turtle was found, how would it impact this project?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, they're only protected under the endangered species law, which is you can't take that animal. You can't harass it. So you couldn't go up and, I don't know, try to catch it or kill it or something like that, take it. That's legally how it's protected. What we would do is we ensure that our contractors know of all known species that are out at a site, and they should be very vigilant in reporting that so that we could properly handle that. That's not, I know it sounds like, what contractor's gonna call, but this really does happen. I'm a third-party inspector for DEP. This does happen on construction sites. Contractors are given a list that it says, this is who you call if you see this snake, if you see this turtle, and they do it. So that's.
Does that impact, would the state intervene if there was verification that they found that type of?
They would probably put a
species?
stop work order on it and require some kind of
All right,
follow-up.
so it potentially would impact the project?
If something was found?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we would, in good faith, we document that and report that to a state agency.
He's asking a different question. Are you asking if it was found during the permitting process or during construction phase?
Either or.
Yeah, so I think the answer is the permitting process.
I meant construction, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I haven't heard of a scenario where that's happened in permitting process, but if that was done, then we would deal with it and look,
Yeah,
look
because if you
into
look
it,
at the
yeah.
state website for Blanding's turtle, and I think, is it box turtles? They have like a special recovery plan.
Yep.
So that just caught my eye to like, well, okay, so what if they did discover something like this? What would the state actually do? How would it impact? Would it just create a reduction?
I see.
Would it just stop order and they're out of luck? I mean,
I
how
can
much of a problem would this actually pose if?
I can only speak to during construction. I can say black racer snakes in southern Maine are kind of common down in the Sanford area. They've been found on some solar sites, and in those cases, when that's happened, construction stopped, and it didn't happen until a certified wildlife biologist went out there, moved the snake off site, and then they documented it to make sure that they weren't coming back on the site. And again, there's precautions they do with the contractors, like they bring them to a training. Usually you make a wildlife management plan. Some of these are things that we would, if they were concerns to inland fisheries and wildlife on our particular site, they would be added as a condition of approval on the DEP permit. So for example, like, if Blanding's turtles, if they read that report and they said, well, we really want to make sure they're not here, they could add a condition to the permit, and we'd talk to them about that. But that
Okay.
hasn't came up.
So you worked with the Army Corps of Engineers, and that's how the begonia thing sort of popped up, right?
The second time, yeah.
The second time, right? Have you reached out to IFNW? And sort of done a refresh on that 2020 letter in terms of, has anything changed the past 4 years or so in terms of what they're looking at from their perspective?
Short answer, no. So,
Okay.
yep, so, we were their review comments were already in as far as the site location permit goes. And I think a question that kind of went unanswered with all the technical stuff is, if we had found Blanding's turtles during the survey and submitted that to IFNW, it wouldn't stop the project. So basically what they would do is they would ask for probably more crossings available and more, especially depending on where they were located, to make sure that those natural drainage ways were preserved. And given the fact that we didn't find any, but we have preserved most of those, like what Lucian was talking about, those wildlife corridors. So even if one was found, it likely would not have changed this plan at all. And if so, it may have been sort of extra sort of conditions of approval, like you were mentioning, like, here's a picture of this turtle, if you see this on site, call this number. There would be some sort of wildlife management plan attached to an approval, which, yeah, okay. Want to make sure I remember that. So, yeah, we actually do Blanding's turtle surveys 2 years for different projects.
Yeah, we've introduced the typical avoidance and minimization you would do if the species was on the site.
Oop, yeah, go to the-
Lucian, you got to talk to Mike.
We're implementing the avoidance and minimization techniques that we would do if this species was on the site with this design right now. So the only thing that would change, like Jason would say, is maybe there's a wildlife management plan that we'd work with Inland Fisheries and Wildlife to attach to our permit if that species was found. That's usually what happens.
Yeah, I don't mean to press the issue, but it was a little strange because I remember that when you guys first came up, it was a pretty significant drought going on in Maine. And it impacted the vernal pools as well as, I think, other species. And so it strikes me for this particular species, at least somebody didn't reach out to IFW and say, hey, I just want to make sure we're still good with this 4 years later on this particular. And again, I'm just quoting what they said in the letter.
Yeah, I think that letter predates our survey. And our survey was handed to them during our DEP.
John Perry, yeah.
During our DEP review, and John Perry's team is the one along with Derek Yorks and Philip Demontier at IFW. They review those things, and they did during the DEP process, and will on this next version too.
Okay, so along that line, sort of same vein, I also know that, with the new, what was adopted by legislature back in 2024, October 24, they did identify 8 new species of concern, endangered species. One I'm pretty sure, because it didn't show up in the original list from IFW as something that you guys ought to think about, which is there's no evidence of cliff or bank swallows, right? Okay. However, it did reaffirm the bat problem, and it's now identified the tricolored bat as endangered.
Yeah.
And that's part of the list that they identified 4 years ago as a species that you got to pay attention to. And I understand about don't cut the trees in the summer, the pups, this and that. But one thing that strikes me is, when you guys came back, and I think this was large, you got approval the second time for an enhancement to the number of units. But I believe that was predominantly because you were shrinking the footprint a bit and going to collapse sort of I don't want to say mountainous, but a very rocky, hilly centerpiece. And we talked a little bit about blasting and the impact and this and that. I guess the only question of, did anybody look at that landscape as it affects bats in particular? Lucian.
I guess not in particular, but if I was to put my biologist hat on, I would say, that ledge and that geographic feature, you can have little crevices and stuff where that would be like winter hibernacula. So that's not where the summer occupancy where the pups would be, but that's where they would hide in the winter. So things like rock walls, caves, right, barns, roofs, things like that is where you're going to find your bats.
Yeah, I'm just curious that, to me, on looking at the maps and sort of what's been discussed earlier, that might have been a site that someone would have said, hey, we ought to look a little bit more carefully at this.
Inland Fisheries didn't identify any concerns with that. It's on the value of bat habitat, it's not very high for that thing in the middle. But like you said, there could be some stuff in there anywhere. That wasn't something that's come up with them.
Okay. And going back to the study that you guys did in September of 2021, FB Environmental, so you guys stand behind this? As
course.
is?
Their guy who did that survey now works for the Endangered Species Program in Inland Fisheries and Wildlife.
So you
He's the
wouldn't-
only person I would use.
So you wouldn't recommend redoing this at all?
No.
Right?
No, not the turtle. No.
Well, anything in here?
No.
I mean, it's pretty comprehensive, right?
It is.
Okay. I think it reinforces what you said earlier, that it's a pretty special, environmentally sensitive,
It is, so therefore it
Wetland
required
slash-
a lot of
right? that-
survey effort, but like Jason said, it was needed, so
Right. And it does feed the Saco River,
certainly does.
right? Okay. So with the new proposal, with the 100-foot frontage for the units, I notice on the layout, you still have units that are abutting Josie's Brook. It's been reduced, but you still have some units. The property line of those units, how close are they to the high water mark of Josie's Brook? What is the actual setback proposed that you're seeking?
So, yeah, so the units there that abut that brook, they're now wider, so our toe of slope, so those were gonna be fill units, right? So, as the road comes up, then we fill over to the side, and then tie our slopes back down to Josie's Brook. We always, when we started, it was 115 feet, so the DEP, IF&W will require 100 feet. We put it at 115 feet, sort of like a little bit of extra, excuse me, 125 feet, sorry. So it was 125 feet that we had there now. We haven't regraded with the new units, so basically for every 200 feet of road, there used to be 3 units, now there's 2 units. And so in certain areas, and we can't guarantee, we don't know exactly where these will be though, but if you take the housing unit and you run it, what we call in the industry shotgun, which is basically the short end faces the road, and then there's ranch style, which is the long end faces the road. There are certain situations where it's much more beneficial to us to run them ranch style, which means if you take a unit like this and then you turn it like this, you're saving a whole lot of grading off the back end. So we won't even get close to that 125 feet with the toe of our slope there. So we're maintaining that 125 feet. And in most areas, I can't tell you exactly where, it would be well in excess of that. But we're giving a 25% bonus to what is required of us already.
Is any, go ahead.
So I will add too, so we're actually, the offset is from a wetland associated with the stream and not just the stream. So when it's like a wide floodplain, we're actually on the high water edge of that floodplain. And then there's 125 feet. So sometimes people get confused as to where the buffer actually starts.
With the buffer, the 125 foot will be on the property line, won't be the actual unit.
Correct, yes. Yeah.
Right.
So the unit area is just shown for permitting sake. That's not actually lot lines. It's just what they call a lotting area for permitting.
Is any of the property in tree growth?
That'd be a question for people who pay the tax bills.
Probably not, but
I'm going to say no.
when's the last time actually timber harvesting was done, and where was it in, do you know? Because what I had understood was years ago it was done from where you're proposing all the way down to Josie's Brook.
If it was done, it was a long time ago. It was some pretty mature timber out there.
So is it new, are we looking at, since that timber harvest, untouched new growth of forest, or has it been cut? Has it been cut, like keep it field open?
No,
or-
it's regenerated well. That's actually what gives it the small world begonia red flag, actually, is like a mid-successional forest is what gives that species the ability to survive. It needs a little bit of sunlight, so you got to cut it. So that's why this fell into that range, because they cut it at that date to where it's grown up to that point.
Got it. Thank you. Any questions while I'm asking my questions that
No?
come to the board's mind? Let's see. Segueing quickly, you didn't get a new real estate appraisal, did you?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm assuming you're attesting that the real estate appraisal from several years ago still is in effect?
Yes, yeah, it certainly would not have gone down.
All right. Thank you. Anybody have any other questions before I open it to the general public if they want to comment or? No. Good. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. Thanks, Lucian. I'm going to open up to the general public. If people want to make any comments, have anything they want to add or say or speak to or rebut that they've heard, feel free to come up and take the podium and introduce yourself. you are permitted to do that.
Hi there, my name is Steve Bradbury. I just have a question about the traffic survey which was conducted. The traffic survey is based on 2022 traffic data, which shows a dramatic increase from the 2019 traffic survey, which is not much of a surprise given the fact that COVID occurred, and I actually enjoyed driving around the roads everywhere when nobody else was driving. And I noticed that actually the 2019 to 2022 reduction is anywhere from 7% on Ospey Trail west of Oak Hill Road. So it's 7%, 5.5%, 10% between 2019 to 2022. And according to the traffic survey, they have increased the volume by 1.5% based on the 2022 data. I do not believe, I'm an engineer, I do not believe that you can actually extrapolate from 2022, given the fact that it was an atypical year. I believe it would be better data were it to be moved forward at the 1.5% increase in volume, or the 0.5% increase in annual traffic growth, which has been used, basing it on the 2019 traffic data. So I'm just asking if that has been taken into consideration, that traffic was atypical in the last survey year, and if the board is willing to consider that, I would suggest maybe some different numbers should be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Want to speak to that?
So actually, sir, if I could just actually look at what you're.
Yeah. It says right here in the paragraph that they've extrapolated the data out based on a 0.5% increase annually. Yep.
So what that is those numbers are provided by MDOT, and so those are for Route 25, not specific to our project. And so, yeah, so MDOT, when they do their permit review, so that's a protocol, that's an MDOT protocol. And I'm not a traffic engineer, so I may get some of this terminology wrong, but so for any project that they look at, they require you to use the most recently published and verified traffic data. So for that project, it would have been 2022, although I swear I saw, do you have the most recent traffic update? Because I remember seeing numbers from 2024.
This is the one which was prepared and submitted on July 23rd.
Yeah, okay. So it's actually a good point. So traffic in 2022, I don't think had rebounded fully yet. It certainly, I think, has now, if anyone's driven on the roads. So I can run that back and check with a traffic engineer, although it wouldn't quantitatively change anything about our project. So those numbers are basically used for trip forecasting, where our trips are coming from and going to outside of our two entrances. And where, due to the number of people, because we have traffic counts that are more recent doing left-hand turns, that sort of, our traffic is what we look like to derive any sort of improvements. And so that traffic on Route 25 is just sort of background traffic, which they use to sort of prepare like the bulk of their report, so to speak, sort of like the background, like rainfall data and a stormwater management report or things like that. So I don't know that it changes any part of your review. Those numbers would not change any part of their review. They certainly would change if we did traffic counts in 2022 on our site, would certainly be different then versus now, but our traffic counts are recent.
And if I recall correctly, even the recent numbers are still well within range to,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
We're not talking,
Yeah,
it
we're
wasn't very
talking-
close on the bubble in terms of significant changes to egress and access and whatnot. Okay. I'll just ask the board, because Jason did say he's happy to kind of run that down, the board feels that's relevant at this point, or if so, I'll entertain a motion. If not, we're good? I think we're good,
Yeah.
right? Thank you, appreciate it. Others from the public?
Sorry, Teresa Kim, I live at 5 Rich Lane, Pine Tree Estates. To answer your question, currently there's 7 open available homes that there is no tenants in, and there is a total of 10 to 12 that's actually for sale incorporated in those 7. That's still pending. One home has been on the market for over 7 months now. And that's due to the incoming lot rents are $887 to $922.
Yes.
Joel Brown, just to clarify, when you, in terms of revenue-producing sites, when you ask me, those are ones that are actually being charged rent or paying rent. So we have one site that is non-revenue. I think what Teresa's referring to, I don't specifically know, but I say this with some confidence, that those are residents that own their home, that are selling their home, not brokering it through us, and those aren't homes, for example, the one that I mentioned that was brought in. The one home that we brought in, it's brand new, that was put on the only vacant site that's left, is we have a cash offer for the listing price, which is $111,900, and that's at the market rent. With regard to the other homes that are being, you know, I can speak to Teresa later or other residents about that. As we have in the past, we've purchased other homes from residents, and then we've resold them. And that remains an option as well.
Sure, thank you. Other comments from the public? All right, questions from the board? Looks good? All right. All right, I'm going to close the public session, and I'm going to take a few minutes to sort of discuss what we've heard tonight, make sure we're comfortable with everything we've heard. Based on the testimony from the applicant, is there any additional information anybody on this board would like to see or run down? Whether it be the traffic study or the environmental impact. Are there any components of that that people feel they need a little bit more information on before they can vote on this?
My only question, I guess, is the planning board, when this goes in front of the planning board, they too will have their eyes on these topics as well, correct?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, before we go through the criteria and vote, I will remind the board that there were 5 conditions of approval that were applied to the last application that was granted. I've reviewed those prior to this meeting. I believe they're all relevant. I don't know if folks have had a chance to look at those. So I would like to make a motion, and I'm happy to read the 5 conditions that I think are still relevant to this proposal. And I can do it, I'll do it individually, and folks can vote on it. And then we can move, if those are approved, or if some of them are approved, we can move into the actual vote of the application. Is that reasonable, or people object to that?
No, reasonable.
Right. So looking at the last couple of approvals, there were 5, and there was 6 actually that were in particular that I think, again, are still relevant to this project with 97 dwellings. The first approval, I'll make a motion that this approval is based upon the applicant's submissions to the Board of Appeals in conjunction with the present application for a special exception and additional information provided by the applicant at the public hearing. Any future modifications to the proposed use as depicted on the plan submitted with the application described in the applicant's submission shall be presented to the Board of Appeals for consideration and approval if, in the sole discretion of the code enforcement officers. Such modifications constitute an alteration or amendment to the materials submitted to the Board of Appeals in conjunction with this application and material impact the applicant's ability to meet the special exception approval standards as set forth in section 18164A of the zoning ordinance, or any condition of this approval. For the purposes of this condition, material impact means to create new or significantly different hazards that were not considered by the Board of Appeals in rendering this decision.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? 4, approved.
Question for JP, though.
Yep.
Is there anything new?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Second condition approval. I'll make a motion that the planning board site plan and subdivision reviews and approvals are required prior to commencement of any use approved hereunder. Just to your point. Yep.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? 4? Approved. Number 3, this approval is granted on the basis of the applicant's representation that it will not use Rosita Drive as an access way for the expansion, and that any change to the plan in that regard will be deemed to meet the material standards set forth in conditions of approval number 1, requiring further review and approval by the Board of Appeals.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? 4 in favor. Thank you. Number 4, based on the applicant's representation that this expansion will consist of 97 new dwelling units lots, and subject to the material standards set forth in conditions of approval number 1, at least 50%, or the maximum number allowed by the zoning ordinance, whichever is greater, of the new residential unit lots in the expansion will be age restricted for individuals age 55 and older.
Second.
For the discussions, all in favor? 4 in favor. Thank you. Number 5, all of the recommendations set forth in the technical memorandum for existing traffic safety and operational assessments dated July 23rd, 2025. Correct, Jason? Yep. Prepared by Traffic Solutions are conditions of approval, not just recommendations.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Approved. And lastly, and I know Jason spoke to this earlier, but I just want to get this on record. The applicant shall maintain a 125-foot undisturbed vegetated buffer to be measured from the upland edge of Josie's Brook associated wetland on each side of Josie's Brook, and no construction or development activity shall occur within this buffered area.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? 4, approved. All right, so those are the 6 conditions of approval. Should this move forward. So now we're going to move into the 7 criteria. We're going to vote on those individually. All right, special exception criteria number 1. I'll make a motion that the proposed use will not create or aggravate hazards to vehicular or pedestrian traffic on the roads and sidewalks, both off-site and on-site, serving the proposed use as determined by the size and condition of such roads and sidewalks, lighting, drainage, and the visibility afforded to pedestrians and the operators of motor vehicles on such roads.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? 4. Criteria 1 has been approved. Criteria 2. I'll make a motion that the proposed use will not cause water pollution, sedimentation, erosion, contaminate any water supply, nor reduce the capacity of the land to hold water so that a dangerous or unhealthy condition results.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Criteria 2 passes. 4 votes in favor. Criteria 3, motion that the proposed use will not create unhealthful conditions because of smoke, dust, or other airborne contaminants.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? 4 in favor. Motion carries. Criteria number 4, motion that the proposed use will not create nuisances to neighboring properties because of odors, fumes, glare, hours of operation, noise, vibration, or fire hazard, or unreasonably restrict access of light and air to neighboring properties.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? 4 in favor, motion passes. Criteria number 5, a motion that the proposed waste disposal systems are adequate for all solid and liquid waste generated by the use.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? That motion passes. Criteria number 6, a motion that the proposed use will not result in damage to spawning grounds, fish, aquatic life, bird, or other wildlife habitat, and if located in a shoreline zone, will conserve shoreline vegetation, visual points of access to waters as viewed from public facilities, and actual points of access to waters.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? That motion passes. And criteria number 7. I'll make a motion that the proposed use has no unusual characteristics atypical of the generic use, and the proposed use will not depreciate the economic value of surrounding properties based upon evidence provided by Maine licensed real estate broker or appraiser.
Second.
Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor? 4. Motion passes. You've heard the conditions of approval. Those will be included in the approval of this application. Congratulations. We have deemed your applicant successful and approved for the purpose of the expansion of 97 units to Pine Tree Estates.
Mr. Chair, I hate to interject one point, but my recommendation is that although the board has gone through and approved every single condition, that there be a final vote to approve the entire application.
Okay.
That'd be helpful. And just a reminder also that the board's going to need, unless it wants to move through the process of drafting findings tonight, the board's going to need to reconvene within the next 7 days in order to approve those findings. I can have those
We
ready
typically
within
do.
a week,
Yeah.
but. okay.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah. All right, I'll make a motion to approve the special exception application for Pine Tree Estates, RHB Properties.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Motion passes. Great. All right, thank you all. Any other business for this evening from the board that they want to bring up?
You want to set a date for,
Yeah, we could set up a date what's next week looking like, or the end of this week, or are people around next week?
Yep.
You guys are folks around? Any day not good?
I'm good next week, any
I'm
day.
going out of town on, starting Wednesday.
So Monday or Tuesday?
Right.
How about Monday? How about Monday next week?
Monday, sure.
Yep, all right, we're going to reconvene next Monday, the 25th of August, to review our findings and the approval. Other than that, I'll make a motion to adjourn the August 18th, 2025 Zoning Board of Appeals meeting this evening.
Second.
Second. I wanted to do something.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Motion accepted and approved. This meeting is now concluded. Thank you.